So the whole point of people telling their stories is to get the entire picture. So we look at these pictures on the wall. It's a story.
Exactly.
It's a story. Each one is a chapter of Caroline's life. It's a chapter that tells the entire story. So if I look at just one painting, is that going to tell the whole story? No. You have to look at the totality of it. Yes, we don't say that.
No, I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to make sure I get. I want to ask a question and frame that with a statement. I'm going to ask it to whoever wants to answer from the entire room. The statement is, I found in my daughter's very limited journal after she died, a sentence that said something like, I'm not sure if I'm depressed or this is normal teenage angst. Okay? And we had no idea that she was dealing with those feelings. Okay? And she told stories all the time. It was a face, it was a mask, right? So my question is, for those of you who have made the switch over, I'll put it that way, from holding it inside and putting up a good face, to talking about it, to sharing your vulnerability, I'm wondering what brought that switch about. One day you're quiet, the next day you're talking.
It's when you're growing up, you know, especially being a black man, you cannot show no weakness, no sympathy. You can't talk. It's like it's illegal to talk about it. Like my father would beat me for crying, and then be like, you know, don't cry. You know, I'm like, what? You know, you can't show it. You can't talk about it. So with me was I found poetry and I just started writing about my life. And I would let some of my friends read it, you know, and they was like, yo, this good, you should share it. And I was like, I barely can talk in front of a classroom, you know, I'm not gonna get in front of a stage and share my stuff. And like I remember the first time that I performed that Memories poem, and I cried on stage and I cried after, you know, and I feel like that was that revelation that I needed. And I feel like that was like me embarking on a journey, and I realized that I can help people with this message because I have people coming up to me telling me how it helped. So if people could see that the issues that they're going through, if it's helpful to others, then maybe they might be more willing to share it. And that's what I do, because when I have one-on-ones with people, they be telling me shit that they go through, and I be like, what? Like how?
So why do you think they feel safe with you?
Because I build connections, and I make it, you know, and I'm vulnerable. Now that I'm telling you my entire life story, I'm vulnerable. So for the people who are holding it in, and they like at that breaking point where they kind of want to tell people, but they don't, they just need to jump off the bridge and just tell people. So you never know who might need it.
I'm hearing just in your story, there's sort of like stepping stones. First you felt safe with it on the page. My daughter was safe with it on the page. Then you shared it with a few friends. And their response was positive reinforcement, and you felt safe. And then you took the step of sharing it in public, and you got this response, and you felt safe. So that safety, you didn't feel safe before because your dad was beating you, right? So it seems to me maybe that's it. What's it take to feel safe?
To have someone that's receptive and non-judgmental. Right. To me, that's the big piece.
And it goes back to what David said about being able to listen. Finding someone who is willing to listen.
It's a model that was the greatest secret in the world for such a long time. You have your NAs, you have your AA. That's the concept that they're built upon. That when you find yourself in the company of people with life experiences, it helps you to break down all of those defenses. And when you can see that what you have gone through and what you're going through helps someone else to go through, or you talk about it going through, that's the key.
And another thing, nobody wants to be looked at as crazy. Like when you tell somebody you suicidal or depressed, like, oh, that motherfucker crazy. You know, nobody wants to be that crazy guy. Even if you watch movies, you read books, the people who cut themselves, they always the outcast. Nobody wants to be the outcast, so they would rather hide it. You see, so that's another thing. Like as a community, as a world, we need to stop shunning people and start bringing people. And like how he said, once you're a drug addict, you will always be a drug addict. Like Jay-Z got this quote. He said, every step you take, they remind you ghetto. So it's hard being Bobby Brown, because to be Bobby then, you gotta be Bobby now. So no matter, he could be clean for 15 years, people are gonna be like, that Bobby Brown used to get high, people still crack jokes on Whitney Houston and she's dead. You know, and they crack jokes on her about her getting high. You never gonna escape this craziness, this addiction, so a lot of people don't even like to, you know.
Yeah, it's the power of the stigma. It really is. It's been a very big problem in the black community. And when I really think about it, I feel like it has a lot to do with, if we go down the history, you know, we as Africans in America, we are really defined by our resilience. With all the crap that we've gone through in the past 400 years, we've had to be resilient. So again, when you bring up mental disorder, mental illness, well, that's a sign of weakness. Like you said, you can't be weak. It's not in our DNA, so it seems, for us to be weak. And we can't show that. And I think we become so dismissive in a lot of ways when that crack in the armor shows. You know, where we'll just, oh, crazy. And that word crazy. And I've tried to become very cognizant of not using that word because of just how strong it is to be called crazy.
And just like,
Yeah, but,
and just like that addict, you know, that doesn't like to admit that they're an alcoholic. You know, they be like, oh, I'm not an alcoholic, but they drinking every morning. You know, so like your daughter said, you know, am I depressed or is this normal? So she's probably telling herself like, no, I'm not depressed, no, I'm not depressed, no, I'm not depressed. Until she you know, it comes to that breaking point and you overdose, you know, and that happens with a lot of people. Like I know people that drink every day. And I'm like, if you drink every day or you have to smoke a blunt of weed to eat, I'm like, you need that. You're dependent on that drug. So therefore, you are addicted. But people don't like to admit it. So they're like, no, I'm not addicted until they end up in a hospital, you know, until they end up dead. So, yeah.
Our office is downtown at 200 East Lexington Street, right next to the courthouse. So for the last week or so, you know, we have experienced the droves of people who are there, the protesters, the TV cameras, the helicopters, the sheriff's car, you know, just everything. When I was walking to the garage tonight to come here, I was just looking around at all the activity, the sirens, the helicopters, the traffic, you know, and everybody kind of on pins and needles, just waiting to hear what the verdict in anticipation of what might happen. And so I'm just wondering if you had the opportunity to speak to the masses, what is it that you would say to them in relationship to their actions after the verdict and how they may do that differently than what happened in April?
Whew. Okay.
To be
No, it's not too deep, but it's interesting because there's so many sides to me. There's an anarchist in me that thinks that the chaos and the calamity was the only thing that people would listen to. Because when everything that went down in April happened, what happened? People listened. Right. Because they got scared. And I hate that it comes to that point. That's the other part is like, I like it because now people are listening to the things that we've been talking about for generations. But we had to bust up police cars and turn things over and destroy, you know, CVS's for y'all to finally listen. So maybe that's what it takes. But at the same time, it shouldn't. And that's truly the problem is why can't we discuss the issues that led to Freddie Gray's death? And I'm not talking about the immediacy. I'm talking about the larger picture. The fact that he was in a systematic environment of poverty, of disadvantage, of racism, of classism, that led to the interaction with the cops that led to his death. That's the larger issue that we need to be talking about. Why does it take for destruction for you to finally sit at the table and open your ears to the obvious? And that's the thing. It's not hidden. It's so damn obvious, especially in this city. The one thing I heard that my mom and I have picked up on: Baltimore and Baltimore-less. That's what exists in the city. Yeah, there was a woman at this meeting, and she said it, and I'm like, blew my mind. As long as I've lived here, I've never heard that categorization of Baltimore. It makes so much sense because that's what it is. So what would I tell the masses? The first thing I would say is I understand. I get it. I absolutely understand. If you wanted to burn the city to the ground, I couldn't understand. I get it. I really, really do. But do I think that's the best use of your energy? No. I think we are all in a time where we can honestly have these conversations, where we couldn't even have these conversations just last year. Let's be honest. This time last year, we were not having this open conversation about racism, about police brutality as a symptom of racism and the police state and things like that. We can have these conversations openly in the public, to politicians, to lawmakers, to the media, because of that. So the first thing I would say is thank you for allowing us to have these conversations. But let's not do it again, because now we can actually have a civilized conversation. Well, I don't want to say civilized, but we can have a cordial conversation. We can speak our truth without destroying our city. And it should be our city. That's a problem too, because it's not our city. We just feel like we're inhabitants, but it doesn't belong to us, because everything can be taken away from us like a snap. We're from East Baltimore. Who can take everything away from us? Hopkins! And I see it every day. I'm literally in the ivory tower. I can see their path of destruction. They're like a virus. And no one can stop them. So I totally get it. I totally understand. Well, why should we care? Y'all care about us, so we're going to burn this motherfucker to the ground. I totally get it. But that's not the best use of our energy, because the conversation has changed. The perspective has changed, finally. But we can now have the conversations that we needed to have for generations. Because people are listening.
And it's weird that I was watching an interview last night. I don't know why I was up like 3:30 in the morning, and I was up watching Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, and Hitler interview. Fidel Castro interview, right? And his exact quotes, I knew I was going to need this for something. And he said, armed struggles is the only path to liberation. He said the noose can only be cut with armed struggles. Revolutionaries didn't choose armed struggles as the best path. It's the path the oppressors imposed on the people. So when I heard that, and it's like, you ask and you ask and you ask, and you don't get it, and then you don't get it, but they're still blatantly killing you, and they say, Freddie Gray got killed because he ran, but you got a list of people, some that didn't run, some did run, some were armed, majority of them were unarmed, so it's like, no matter if you dark skin, light skin, whatever. And I don't think there's one person that could control the masses. You get what I'm saying? Because everybody has that in their heart. People know, like, we live off of these American beliefs, give me liberty or give me death. But it's like as soon as we, exemplify that quote, we get looked at as crazy or thugs. But we got this from y'all. So America's saying, give me liberty or give me death, and
unless it's you.
Huh?
Unless it's you.
Unless it's me.
Yeah.
I can't say
Give me liberty or give me death. Unless it's you.
Or somebody say thug life, I don't give a F, then they look at as terror. But you can say, give me liberty or give me death, and you can go to another country and take what's yours by armed forces. But it's a problem when we even voice our opinions. You get what I'm saying? So when people running out the stores and they bursting windows, I feel like that's so minuscule, it's small, you get what I'm saying? And I was the guy, I'm like, why they burning? I'm in Virginia, I'm like, why they burning down CVS? They so stupid. But then I had to realize, all that anger built up. So to be honest, there's no one person that can control the masses. I don't care if Obama got on TV, and Obama is like the ideal, he been like the ideal black guy, since he been in office, and if he got on TV and said it, and people even was more mad because Obama got on TV and called them thugs. He called on people that was uprising, he called them thugs. So it's not one person that controls them. I feel like it's gonna happen. If you look at any point in history, there's not one point in history when something like this happened and everybody was like Martin Luther King, we shall turn other cheek and we shall overcome.
But what I would say is, and I gotta say this, been around the world, been Korea, Japan, Alaska, been to some ghettos. It never helps when you destroy your own. All we ever do is place ourselves further back. If you remember the piece in Malcolm X, when he said he never got what Martin was saying until he went to Mecca. And when he went to Mecca, he realized that it was more than black. It was more than one color. It was, and I'm going to tell you this with 20 years of recovery under my belt, right? And I still remember the Twin Towers and how I felt when I saw my people jumping out of windows and babies being killed. And it had nothing to do with color, right? So what I've learned is I can't compartmentalize everything that happens and bring it to race. What my job is to bring it to humanity. And what gets lost in our conversations is that we begin to, because you said it, and if you said it and you really understand it, there's only one race. There's no races. It's been proven. I've watched National Geographic do this thing with this DNA swab all over the world. And what they've come to find out is there were only one race, and that there were mega men of this race that went on. So what we destroy is ourselves. And so what I would tell Baltimore is we don't need to destroy ourselves anymore.
Or what is considered our own. Because like you say, when you got the youth, they feel like they have nothing. They taking away schools, they taking away rec centers, they taking away buildings, homes. Nobody feels like Baltimore is there. They taking away lives. What aren't they?
But here's what I'm going to tell you. This is not a new thing. So what I'm going to tell you is what is new is us.
I don't think that
we're new.
Like the CPS was there. I heard a young lady say, she said, well, CPS has been robbing us for years because that's the same store. They charge $5 for a gallon of milk. When you go elsewhere, you pay $2. So I don't think that they saw that as their own. It was something people were taking from them, so they took from CPS. I don't condone it, but I can definitely understand what they were saying. I mean, $5 for a gallon of milk, that's, you don't pay those prices up.
Yeah, it's up again. I'm gonna connect some dots here. I think you've talked about the importance of listening, and people opening up, people ready to listen. And we've talked about that in relationship to a young person in pain who feels they need, they've got pain and they need to share it. And now it's really interesting because we're talking about the very same thing at a sociological level, at a societal level, where you have a demographic that has just been not listened to, and not acknowledged for the pain that culture is experiencing. And so it's just interesting to see the conversation go from the importance of listening to the person to outrage and not being listened to as a group. It's the same solution, it seems to me. It begins with the same solution. Because listening, that doesn't cure pain, but it begins, it's the opening door, it opens the door.
Yeah.
So what's the outcome of who's listening now? You destroyed the legal, who's listening? I think I'm asking the question from been away in Florida for a while. I'm not getting anything happening still.
Well, and it's frustrating. It really is, because I know a lot of people have voiced that, now it's just back to normal. So then, if a verdict comes out that people don't like, we destroy the city again.
Exactly.
Now people are listening.
And you go back to what?
It is really frustrating. And to me, that's the $1 million question.
So back to us.
It does come back to us, and it's what we can do within our own space. I trust me, I would love to have the ear of the president, the entire cabinet, all the governors of the United States, all the mayors of the city, but the World Bank, the IMF, NATO, United Nations. I would love to have their ear because I think they should listen to me. I really do. But that's just not the case. So then, should I just give up? Should I just say, okay, well, I can't get to the top of the world power, so that's it? No. There's what we can do in our own space. We can do things in our own space.
And I think, in terms of what Peter was saying, from my perspective, I got a lot of people who are puzzled about how we got there. If you come and work with me for a day in the public school system, you will see exactly how we got there. It's almost designed to keep these students, these children, these black men actually exactly where they are. There's nowhere for them to go.
Right.
I'm literally coming in there, I'm working every day, but I'm just seeing them do the same thing over and over again. They're not passing, they're not failing. Next thing they go on to the next grade, they find something more appealing outside, and then they end up in the juvenile system, then they end up in jail. It's just designed to keep these guys, and some of these girls exactly where they are. And so I would say, if anyone has a question about it, come hang out with me someday. And we can go and you can sit and meet with IEPs, with children who are disadvantaged, with children who have disabilities, who are emotionally disabled, or we label them as emotionally disabled, but they may not be. Just come and see exactly what's happening. You can figure out how we got to the Freddie Gray incident. Everyone's very puzzled about this. It's really not that puzzling.
I'd like to have.
Yeah.
I was listening, but I have one question. But what do we do next? We're
Mm.
gonna sit here. What we gonna do?
You mind if I jump in the conversation? I apologize, I was a little late today. But what we do next is beautiful. One of the things, my parents are a little bit older. I'm 34, my dad's 70, my mom just turned 68 on a Sunday. And they were born when Baltimore was burnt to the ground. My parents, they raised me, grew up in Baltimore City on the west side. Alice Pender Hughes was my neighbor. She's the name of the Baltimore City public school system. Kirk Schmoke was my neighbor. I grew up seeing, my dad was press secretary to Governor Schaefer. My mother has been the CEO of Family Health Centers since I was born. I grew up having, right? Still grew up in a black neighborhood. My parents were like, racism is not allowed in this house. So we weren't allowed to be racist. We weren't allowed to look at people and say, we don't like him because he's white, or she's not dark enough, or that didn't play in my house. As I got older, I saw a lot of things through the eyes in which my parents taught me. So I saw a lot of classes. But then my parents, being older, also showed me these videos. And one thing that we're missing, and what do we do next, is true black leaders. We have too many people who are black who want to be on TV. I'm not going to say any names. My best friend always gets on because he knows this dude. He knows this dude gets under my skin. But when I see you pop up on TV because a cop killed a black man, and you're there, and like you said, come to my school, come to the area where I work, where this black kid was killed by another black kid. I don't care who is killing black men and women. I want it solved. And the issue, where do we go from here, is we have to have black leaders who don't care about the press. They're not trying to get their face on TV because they want to get into politics and out of the church. But really, because they want to lead and they want to show. I love Martin because you know what, and this is something that I hate about history class. They segregate us. And we don't realize it. When you learn about Martin Luther King Jr. and the march, we hear all about the black people that march. We don't ever hear about the white people that march. They're segregating us. And it's not white people are segregating us. It's the people with power. I don't care what color they are. They got money and power. And what they've realized is, if we can segregate the masses, we can keep our money and power. If we have you guys sitting on opposite sides fighting, we can act like, oh, I'm a Republican and I don't like Democrats. But let me tell you something. At the end of the day, you know they all go off and drink together. Republicans and Democrats, they sit side by side. They smoke their cigars. They have their whiskey sours, and they laughing at us because we like, oh, black this, white this, and it's not like that. So what do we do now? We have to have leaders. We have to have leaders who are true to the cause of the human race, as you say, excelling and lifting up. Too many times I hear black people on one side and white people on the other, and it's not like that. We got white people in this room, black people in this room. I love the fact of what Peter is doing because he's bringing the cause of heroin, the cause of stigma, mental health, and he's putting it out there, not in a way where, listen, it's only black and white, but he's giving a form.
And another thing,
I've got to say something, because in answer to your question and in answer to your question about what's next, I'll tell you something. There's nothing new under the sun. And the issues that we're dealing with have been dealt with for millennia. We do have examples of things that work, but why it is we can't get them promoted. And let me give you one. When working on my master's, we looked at the Brooklyn Project. That's where you go in and you deal with the needs of not just family in a community. You go in and you're dealing with the community and the families there, irrespective of ethnicity. You're looking at that community, you're looking at the families that comprise it, you bring those families together, you're looking at their strengths, you're looking at their weaknesses, and community by community, you're building people up. People, children, seniors, and we've got evidence. But like you said, how much more studying do we have to do? How many more questions do we have to ask? We have examples of what works. We do.
And what I say is just like how he mentioned Peter, and how Peter probably